Thanks, everyone, for joining us for today's episode of The Capitalist Investor. Just like every other week, guess who you got? You got Mark. I don't have a nickname. And you got Diamond Hands Derek.
What's up, Mark? How's it going, man?
It's good. It's good, man. I need a nickname.
We'll have to work on that.
Yeah, we got to work on that.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have a good one off the top of my head, but...
I hate to put you on the spot, you know? So maybe our listeners can email us with some good nicknames.
Yeah.
And don't be foul about it, you know? Be tactful. How are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. The summertime weather in Cleveland is pretty crazy.
This heat wave
Makes it difficult on the golf schedule, and I'm sure your kids' baseball schedule as well. Are they still playing?
Yeah. By the time this is released, they will not be playing. But yeah, it's crunch time, man. It's playoff week for us. We showed up at the field yesterday, got rained on for 30 minutes, and then the game was called.
Yeah.
That always stinks. If it's gonna rain by 3 p.m. so I don't have to waste my time going to the field.
Yep.
The rain it never listens to advice. It just does what it wants to do. I don't understand.
And my kids are 2 and 4, so I'm not quite there yet. But
Yeah.
between you and a lot of my other buddies, the kids' baseball schedule seems to dominate
It does.
what they're
It does.
doing.
You know, I was talking with my dad about this last week. It's interesting for guys like us who are working full time. At the end of this summer, we're going to judge the summer weather by what the weekends were like.
Right.
Monday through Friday doesn't matter because we're working, right? But if Saturday and Sunday were crappy all year, we're going to look back and think it was an awful summer.
Right.
But then there's a whole group of other people who are retired, kids, they're at home, and they're looking at all 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Me, when I'm sitting inside working my butt off and it's sunny and 75 degrees outside, I don't even notice it.
Right.
You know, hopefully we can get out and start golfing soon, bud.
Yes.
Got to get out there. All right, man. So for today's show, I want to talk about sourcing hidden gem stocks. So I was talking with my man Charles Payne about this on his show yesterday. And, you know, obviously when you're on TV, you got maybe 60 seconds to get into something. But I thought this was a solid topic that I wanted to allocate at least 10 minutes to. Right? Just kind of going through the process for sourcing some of those diamonds in the rough, hidden gems, names that like aren't on everyone's radar. You know, they're under the radar companies. Not a lot of people talk to them. There's probably zero or maybe just a little bit of institutional coverage. But if you're an investor and you are looking to potentially hit a home run within a small sleeve of your portfolio, I think this is where you have to look, you know, for those potential 10Xers, right? So a company that's $1 billion, in 5 years, it's worth $10 billion, right? And you 10X'd your money. You're not going to get 10X kind of performance over the next 5 years out of the FANG names, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, because they've already done it.
Yep.
Now, they could do it. Again, I think it'd be very difficult at this point, and there's nothing wrong with holding those names as core positions in your portfolio, because those are your, I'm going to get on base, I'm going to get a single, a double, I'm going to avoid strikeouts, so there's nothing wrong with those positions. But I think if you're in a position where with 5, 10, 20% of your portfolio, you want to swing out of your shoes and try and crush a grand slam, I think it makes sense for us to kind of go through the process on how we do it, but most importantly, how our listeners can do it, because they don't have access to some of the resources that we might.
Right. You know, I think you hit on several great points in there. I think number one, the easiest place to start is these stocks are under the radar for a reason, right? Because not a lot of people know about them.
Yeah.
They're not easy to find. You can't just go in there and, you know, Google some names and, you know, 10X your money in a week.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I think a lot of people are, I don't know if used to is the right term, but that seems to be what's popular these days, especially with the crypto, you know, the Bitcoin, the Dogecoin.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone just wants to, you know, throw $500 at something and, you know, be buying a private island in 2 months. It doesn't usually work that way.
I'd like to do that too.
It sounds awesome.
It's hard work.
Right.
It's very hard work.
Yep. So, you know, it's And I saw you mention it on TV as well. A lot of these stocks are micro-cap stocks.
Yep.
And they are not covered by, a lot of either
The
mainstream
JP Morgans of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially, some questions that I get, especially through clients who are in a specific industry. They have names that frankly, haven't always heard of when they tell me about them.
Yeah.
But they're publicly traded, or maybe even over-the-counter type stocks. So they're just not on a lot of people's radar.
Correct.
So, with that in mind, especially those over-the-counter names, which we've talked about on the show before, the over-the-counter, they don't trade like,
they're not on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
You can't even trade them on Robinhood.
Mm-hmm. So they're difficult to unload if you wanted to.
Yep.
At that point. So, we're going to get into it here, but make sure you have the right allocation for these, potential home run, home run swings, if you will, because, if you look at it, just over the last 10 years, the S&P 500, the average return is something like 13.6%.
Yep.
Which is incredible.
Yep.
Especially if you kind of started in this industry in the beginning of the 2000s. it's hard to believe we've had a decade like that.
Yeah.
So, we want to be sure we're mixing in these names, as a complement to our core holdings.
I also want to be very clear about how we're investing, D. So first things first, I'm going to do a quick promo for our company. So the promo I'm doing here is by August 1st, we will be rolling out a new microcap strategy for our clients.
Yep.
So I'm very excited about that. People that follow me on Fox Business have probably kind of latched on to some of those microcap calls that I've had, whether it's BBQ, which is Famous Dave's, or Playboy, or Silvergate, or Dermtech. I mean, those stocks have just gone parabolic. Right? They've gone through the roof since I brought them up. But also, for every Dermtech, for every Playboy of the world, there's an Aspen Aerogels that I pick, right? Which until today, it's up 20% as we're recording this show today. For the last 3 or 4 months since I made that call, it's done absolutely nothing. Okay, so just to be crystal clear, like you're not going to hit a home run every single time. And you don't want to push all of your chips in on one stock. Like, at a bare minimum, come up with like 10 of them. Maybe 6 or 7 pan out. Maybe 2 are complete duds and they get cut in half. And then maybe 1 or 2 just kind of go sideways.
Yep.
But I think you need to have more than one.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the key points I had written down as well. You have to have several swings, right? Especially look at those home run hitters, right? They're not hitting home runs every time. They're striking out a lot, which we've seen. How about the umpires checking the pitchers for sticky substances? Have you seen any of that?
It's wild.
It's just crazy stuff. I can't believe that's happening. But yeah, absolutely do your research, source the names. We're going to talk about all this stuff, but don't just pick one.
Yeah.
It's too hard to do. Come up with a list and invest the proper allocation according to your situation and plan.
Yeah. So, all right. So let me hit on the two steps, and then let's dive deeper into each of the steps. So, these 2 steps are self-explanatory, but first one is you got to source the names or ideas.
Right.
Easier said than done. Okay. And the second one is you got to do your research and due diligence because there's a chance that nobody covers it and you can't piggyback off someone else's research.
Right.
Okay. So that's difficult. So let's kind of dive into how can our listeners potentially source these names or ideas, given that probably a good majority of our listeners are not institutional investors. They don't have access to institutional research, and some of these names probably aren't covered by any institution anyways.
Right.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts on different ways that you can source that next potential 10X kind of company?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to do it now, thanks to the internet, and mainly, believe it or not, I would say social media is probably one of the good places to at least get ideas from.
Yep.
And what I had written down is try to figure out the space that you want to get into. Historically, a good place to hit home runs has been, the pharmaceuticals, biotech, right? The companies working on the next big drug or things like that. So
that's an easy way, in my opinion, and I tend to gravitate towards those names. Mm-hmm. That's an easy way that if their drug is a game changer and it gets approved, those can 3x to 5x pretty quickly.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm, sure.
With no revenue. Mm-hmm. Because the revenue will eventually come.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's another great, in that space, for example, that is a great example of needing to pick out, 2, 3, 4 names because they're not always going to work out, right? Sometimes the drugs that they're working on make it to clinical trials and they don't work. I've seen dozens of those throughout, just my time in the industry.
Well, whose vaccine was it? Was it AstraZeneca? There was recently a vaccine that was kind of a belly flop. I forget which company it was, but one of them just really was either it wasn't overwhelmingly positive or maybe it was a complete dud. And then you've got, even issues with the vaccines that are effective, heart inflammation and I think strokes from maybe the Johnson & Johnson one.
Yeah.
Just strange stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, you're right. And those got pushed through as quickly as possible.
Right.
So,
yeah, social media and honestly, even more recently, and it was news to me, but the Reddit boards out there.
All right. So you just mentioned social media and Reddit. I don't want to cut you off, but I need to know, is Reddit considered social media?
I mean, I would say no. I'm not an expert.
I'm not a social media expert either. But I was thinking, I'm like, does Reddit count as social media? I don't know. There's an app for it.
I thought Reddit was, before all these meme stocks came into popularity, I thought Reddit was essentially obsolete.
Yeah,
right?
I think it was.
I thought Reddit was where people went, 15 years ago to argue about stuff, on the internet.
Yeah.
Like sports takes, sports teams, video games. Like I thought that's where those people went to talk about that stuff. But even kind of my, foray into, NFTs and things like that. There's lots of people out there talking. You obviously have to be careful about what you're looking at to verify some of the claims out there. But when you're talking about trying to find names that you can research on your own, that's really a great place to start.
Yeah. So I agree. Reddit has become front and center for giving people the ability to source these names. I have not been overly involved in scouring the Reddit message boards. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many of them are these microcap or small cap stocks where there's a solid fundamental thesis behind it.
Right.
Versus how much is there's high short interest or here's a catalyst. I think if we all come together, we can drive this thing up 100%. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But I think what the focus of our show is not in investing in something that is going to be a short-term high flyer because of the diamond hands movement.
Right.
Not to be confused with Diamond Hands D. But rather those stocks that are kind of like, we think they can 3x to 5x very quickly, maybe within the next year or two. But we'd also be comfortable holding them for the next 5+ years.
Right.
I don't know that I could say that about like an AMC or a GameStop.
No.
It's possible, depending on what they do with, obviously they've issued shares, they've raised capital. Who knows? Maybe they can completely turn around their businesses. Those strike me more as trades as opposed to investments. And this show is about investments.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, because you can even, the meme stocks, this is the page I look at, memestocks.org actually, it's just the Wall Street Bets most mentioned stocks, right?
That's cool.
So CLOV is at the top of the list today. But this is something different.
Nothing really special about that company, by the way.
Yeah.
They sell like health insurance and Medicare insurance.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I looked at that for a show a couple weeks back.
And we've owned eHealth in the past, which is basically the Expedia for all of that insurance, right?
So that's a great page, but I think it's something different than what we're talking about here.
Let's make sure we get that in the show notes. I think that's interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you look at the names on there. Obviously, GameStop and AMD are on there. Is that AMD?
Yep. AMD.
Okay.
AMD
so
is always
GameStop and AMC are on there. I'm surprised to see AMD on there. That is a stock that we've held for a long time. Great fundamental company that we recently just bought more of. So interesting to see that. But you look at Palantir, high upside potential company. Virgin Galactic, that is pure speculation in my opinion at this point.
Yep.
I mean, they're going to do $3 million in revenues this year at a $10 billion market cap. That's crazy. Maybe they grow into it, right? I don't want to be a negative Nelly on that one. Clean Energies, that's a natural gas focused company. So look, there are some companies in there where there is a good, solid, longer term fundamental growth story.
Yep.
Right. So I like looking at the Reddit board. Twitter is a source of good ideas. FinTwit, there's a StockTwits app. I really don't get on there much. In fact, I don't get on there ever. But I think that's a good place to exchange ideas. But D, what I really like is like all the stuff we've mentioned so far is free. And I am a big believer that you get what you pay for. And I think if you're just focusing on the free resources, you're limiting your opportunity, and you're going to have a lot of conflicting information, conflicting opinions on every single stock that's out there. There's too many people talking for and against a particular stock. So what I like is the pay-to-play services. There's a lot of analysts or investors or traders out there who they've got this Substack newsletter thing. I have no idea what that is. But apparently, like, you just go and you write your newsletters and you can sell someone a $10 or $50 a month subscription.
Right.
There's something to be said about being a part of a private group, which is pay to play. I like that. I think that's where there's better idea sharing, maybe more respect for the people who are in there because they're paying members. I mentioned Charles Payne. I know he's got a subscription service. I know the Nigerian brothers, they have a subscription service. So I do like those pay to play, and they're not very expensive either.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you crushed it there. That's it. It's funny because, way long ago, I was meeting, people out on the west side of Cleveland that were part of a stock picking group.
Yeah.
Right. And things were much different back then. It was probably more common names that they were picking, off the Dow or the S&P 500.
Yep.
But getting people together who have enough foresight to want to pay money to be part of a group is going to, and again, it's obviously not going to be 100%, but that is a fantastic way to not only source names, but talk through them, which I think is important to have. Twitter and Reddit tend to be more shouting matches, right?
Yeah, exactly.
than controlled discussions. So yes, absolutely.
And they're not that expensive, D.
It's very reasonable from the ones that I have seen.
Yeah.
Especially for, if you're going to put serious money into some of these different names, it's great to have some real research or some groups that are backed. Most of these groups, you mentioned big names there, but even probably some of the smaller local groups are headed by people that know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, absolutely. That's a great spot to look for some of these names.
All right, so I think we did a good job kind of diving into how to come up with the ideas and the names in the first place. Once you've come up with the ideas and the names, so look, man, personally, I think I got pitched while I was on TV today 4 or 5 stocks on Twitter, maybe more. right? Someone comes at me with an under-the-radar name because somehow, some way, I've become that guy who brings these under-the-radar names to the investing public, and all of a sudden people understand their potential. So I got hit with like 4 stocks while I was on TV. All small names. I have never looked at any of them, but you better believe I'm going to take a peek.
Right.
I'm going to look at them now, right? So I'm fortunate enough in that people will pitch stocks to me now. That helps me to source some good ideas. Right. But let's assume I got pitched 4 stocks today. What's the next step? Right. So the next step is to do your homework. Just because some other dude on Twitter likes a company doesn't mean you should invest in that company.
Right.
You don't know how much homework he or she has done. Maybe their brother-in-law is the majority shareholder.
Right.
Like, you never really know. So you gotta dive deeper. You got to do your homework. So you got to research the company. So the very first thing you should do is you should see if there's any institutional coverage out there at all. Maybe there's a very small little equity research firm that happens to cover that particular stock. Figure out a way to get your hands on that research report. That's a great starting point. All right. Let's assume, though, D, that there's no institutional coverage at all. There's not a single equity research firm out there that covers these stocks that you're interested in. What do you do then? I would say you start off by going to the website, learning about the company, the process, their product, their service, and researching their management team. Because this falls right into how we invest in large cap companies as well.
Yep.
If we don't like the management team, I don't care if the stock has quadrupled already this year. We're not going to buy it because it doesn't check off that box. If we don't believe in their growth story, i.e. selling health insurance and med sup insurance, it's not interesting enough for me. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just not interesting. I don't want it, right? So, I think making sure you're comfortable with the growth story, what they do, their product or service, and the management team, that's the first thing. And with a lot of these companies, you can possibly figure out if you can order some sort of investor kit from them. Sometimes they have an investor relations department, other times maybe not, but that would be a good starting point.
Yep.
Right? After that, dude, where do you go next?
Well, I think one of the things... So we found the name, right? We've done a little research. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to buy it today, right? Valuation is the last leg of the stool, if you will, for us. Finding a good stock screener where you can track the prices of these companies, I think, is very important.
Yep.
And also determining, most likely these names that have found their way to you have probably already run up to some degree.
Yep.
So we need to figure out what is our entry point going to be.
Yep.
What does the price need to get down to before we're comfortable in buying it?
Yeah.
So finding a stock screener out there. Honestly, NerdWallet is a pretty good source for all things finance. I've personally used them for like picking out a interest-free credit card or a good credit card with a point system, things like that. But they had a good list of stock screeners out there. But TD Ameritrade and Fidelity, I took a look at both of theirs. They're pretty good. So figuring out the entry point and frankly, just getting organized, right?
Yeah.
Just because you come up with 10 names doesn't mean you need to buy all 10. Track them for a while and see where you're comfortable at what price you want to enter those stocks at.
Yeah. I'm going to go one step further, D. So it's different if you're us. We manage quite a bit of money for our clients. So I have the ability with a lot of these microcap companies to arrange for a Zoom meeting or a phone call with upper management.
Right.
Typically, the CEO and CFO are willing to hop on a call or a Zoom with me because they know that there's a large pool of money, and if we were to allocate 2% of our investments to it, that's a very substantial investment in their company, right? Or a very substantial amount of money flows flowing into their stock, which obviously influenced the price of the stock. But for those of you sitting at home, who don't have that opportunity, because if you're all by yourself and you've got $1 million, which is a good chunk of money, you still can't talk to the CEO or CFO of a company by yourself. Okay? It's never going to happen. Now, D, going back to the join a group thing that we've talked about, you said you went to a group on the west side. Who knows? Maybe there were 30 members that showed up that day, and average account balance may have been $1 million. That's $30 million collectively. Maybe that group could get a meeting with key management. The individual investor probably can't, but that's just yet one more reason to potentially join a pay-to-play investment group.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point.
Because otherwise, like, look, man, if you're thinking about buying 10 shares of their stock, the CEO is not going to talk to you.
Right.
And there's, typically some pretty good feet to the fire questions you can ask key management about maybe the potential risks that you might see on the horizon, what they're doing to mitigate those issues. Obviously, that's the last thing you do, is try to get a crack at key management, because you better have done a heck of a lot of homework so you know which questions to ask.
Yep, for sure.
Anything else you think is important as it relates to doing your homework?
I think the last thing I wanted to mention is also to have patience,
Yes.
Mark usually comes up with the analogies, but I thought of one, barbecuing, smoking, right?
Yes.
Something we both like to do. The first time I did it, it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Right. I bought a smoker, watched some YouTube videos, and then you go after it. Right. So you're gradually going to get better every time that you do it.
Yep.
Because you learn from, both successes and mistakes, usually mistakes at the beginning. Investing is almost the same, right? You're probably not going to hit a home run on the first stock that you buy.
Yep.
Maybe if you were doing it over the last 5 years, maybe you did hit some home runs, but it's a process to figure out exactly what, how to start from, I have no idea where I want to invest this money, to I'm buying, microcap stocks here. You need to kind of learn your process over time. So you don't need to rush into all of these things all at once. Do a little trial and error, because it's not always going to be, a home run on your first swing.
All right, so you are the master smoker. So I'm going to ask you to share your rib strategy in just a second. But let me ask you this first. Let's assume you're smoking ribs. How many times do you open the smoker?
Probably I don't open it at all for the first 3 hours.
Yes. I think a rookie mistake is opening it too often.
Yep.
And spraying something on it. Like, seriously. And I've learned over time, the less you open the smoker, typically the better the ribs come out.
100%.
All right, so give our listeners your rib strategy. How long do you cook it for? What's the heat? How do you prep them? And that'll be it for today's show.
All right.
But this is more important than how to pick a stock.
Absolutely.
You don't want to screw up your ribs. All right?
Especially when you got a group of people coming over.
There's nothing worse than that.
No. So I usually do, I'm more of a no sauce guy. So
Dry rub?
Yep.
Yep.
So we're in Cleveland, so I'm a big Michael Simon fan. He's got a barbecue joint here. He does all kinds of barbecue specials on the Food Network. So I'm more of a dry rub guy, but I go kind of the 3-2-1 method. On my dry ribs, I do a basic salt and pepper and rib rub on there, I would say. So if you do a store-bought rub, I just mix in a little extra salt and pepper, basically.
Okay. The night before, the day of?
The night before,
Yep.
if you can. And I would do it the night before. I like to use the Cleveland ballpark mustard to rub on there first.
Oh, yeah. I've never tried that. That's good.
And then you sprinkle the rub on top of that so it sticks there. On my dry ribs, I basically just put them in there for about 4.5 hours.
And just let it go.
And just let it go.
Yep.
On my, the sweet
sauce ribs, yeah.
So 3 hours on. Then I wrap them up with a little bit of butter, honey, and brown sugar. flip them over so the meat side down. That's an important part. Do that for about a 90 minutes until they're nice and perfect. And then I put a little sauce on them, and I only put them back on the smoker for about another 15 minutes.
Nice.
So I found the 3-2-1 method. If you do a full hour at the end, they tend to dry out a little bit. So I don't do that anymore.
At 225?
About 250 because I'm usually spare ribs. I like spare ribs better than the baby backs.
Okay.
So the spare ribs have more fat in them. So they can take a little bit higher temperature. I would say you're safe even up to 275.
That right there is a hidden gem of information.
Yep, there you go.
My man, Diamond Hands Smoker Master D coming through again. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, info@SWP Connect. Hit the subscribe button, write us a review, tell your friends about us, all that good stuff, and we'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.